That's awesome, man. Um, all right. Let's get into this photography topic a little bit. So, thanks for coming on and doing the podcast. I'm super jacked to hear about this. But can you just give us a little bit of your background with photography, maybe how you got into
hmm
it? I think it's really interesting when you very first started. If you could just talk about, how you decided to do it, and then maybe even if like what feedback did you get from your friends at the time or your family at the time, and maybe give
hmm
us a little bit of information about your experience level today, like what have you done to improve your skills, and where would you say you're at as far as your skill level today?
Okay, cool. Yeah, there's a lot that we can talk about there, Trev. That's a good question. So I started with photography. I mean, honestly, I think my uncle gave me my first like disposable camera when I was like 8 years old, and always loved it. Like immediately. I mean, I was just drawn to it. Really liked the idea of being able to capture a moment. And pretty early on, I started just realizing that I was way more geared towards the landscape side of stuff, the nature side of stuff in its natural environment. A lot of people are portrait photographers, your wedding photographers, your senior photo photographers, that kind of stuff. And I dabbled in that briefly, but I realized that I really, really, really felt high levels of gratification just out shooting in nature. So I kind of started going along that path. I mean, not really seriously until I would say I was in my very early 20s, maybe like 22, 23. And I pretty quickly realized the therapeutic value. It's there's something to be said where it's kind of like very zen like almost, where you kind of get lost in the moment and you're not thinking about anything other than the present. You're not thinking about past traumas. You're not thinking about stresses about tomorrow. You're thinking literally about the present. I mean, it's like very in tune with nature when you are doing that. And when you're trying to capture photography in nature, that's obviously something that will enhance your photos, right? So,
I love that, man.
I, yeah, it's been incredibly invaluable for me as far as just processing difficulties in my life. Processing everything from a very micro or macro, like, oh my god, I went through this traumatic breakup, to all the way down to a very micro example of, oh, today was really stressful and I want to get in my pickup, drive around gravel roads and just like try and find animals on the side of the road to photograph. But the thing about photography is that anybody who is in who is a photographer will very easily be able to tell you, you get drawn into a photo. If I am out driving around and I see it's sunset and I see this cool um, group of trees across a field and there's a lot of contrast there, and I like, okay, well, it's going to be a landscape photo, so I want a lot of detail, I want a lot of depth of field, so I use a very small aperture, and if I'm doing that I need to set it up on tripod, so I grab my tripod, I set it up, and then I try and get the best possible lead in lines like into the photo to draw like a viewer into the photo, and I try and get the best possible lighting and contrast, and I decide what parts of the landscape I want to bring out. Do I want to focus on the brightness of the sun, or do I want to focus on the shadows? Do I want to leave the shadows kind of intact? Is it something that I'd want to make black and white, or is it more value
Wow.
in the color photo? And what happens is you get so drawn in that next thing you know, and you can speak to this, Trev, because you've been with me when I've done this, you can get drawn in for 20, 30, 40, 50 minutes to get one photo. And that's what photography becomes for landscape photographers. And it
Yeah, so
really,
just let
really,
me
really, no, go ahead.
oh, I know, I just wanted to say really quick that when I have been with you when you're doing this, you don't, I think you're doing a lot of those things you just mentioned, which I didn't have any idea that you were doing any of that. I think you
hmm
do it in your head. Like you're probably looking and thinking and taking it all in,
hmm
but I never knew you were doing a lot of that. I mean,
Yeah,
when
I
you
mean,
talk about
that's
lead in
DSLR.
lines,
Yeah. So Um, okay, if you're looking at my video right now, I kind of, because this is what photographers, your brain starts operating this in everything you do, right? So if you look at just my video right now, you'll see lead in lines. Like you'll see the top one side of my screen is the window blinds, and they kind of come in, they draw into the middle of the frame. And then another on the other side is that cabinet. So, like, you kind of have the bottom lines coming up and the top lines from the top of the cabinet coming down, and it all kind of converges. You kind of have the desk a little bit, but not really as a lead in line, but it draws you in. It's just one of the techniques where photographers look to try and find that just to be able to provide a photo that is interesting. And that's what I mean by that. Honestly, I mean, I didn't really intentionally do it real closely, but when you're talking about something in nature, you'll adjust your camera. Like, I mean, I will walk forward, I will walk backwards, I will move a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right to try and get as many lead in lines. A lot of times it's sky and clouds, and you try and get them coming out of the corners of the frame of the photo. And if you're able to do that, and then you have really, really, really good subject matter on top of it, and maybe you get really lucky and there's some wildlife in it, or maybe you get like National Geographic lucky and a bear is fighting a bald eagle, then next thing you know, you have just the craziest photo ever. But that's kind of inherently what you look for. A lot of photographers will scope places out ahead of time and then wait for the right conditions. Like, they'll be like,
Yeah.
okay, this
Do
is a
you
cool ridge
research?
here. This is a valley.
Okay. No, go ahead. Keep going.
Um, yeah, no, like it'll be like this is a valley, and this is a crazy, crazy setup. Lighting isn't quite right now, but when lighting does become amazing, this would be a great sunset photo. Or like, oh my goodness, if a storm was approaching from the east and I'm to the west and I'm looking to the east, this would be amazing. And like some of the most renowned photographers literally had places in mind and had imagined up something that eventually will happen in nature, and they're like, okay, when that event is going to happen, I want to be at this spot. And I mean, that's the level that it comes to when you talk about like photographers that are doing anything with astrology or astronomy, excuse me, and they're like looking at like moon phases and stuff like that. They're literally planning out where the moon will be at the time of the eclipse in the sky, and they're trying to literally plan it out mathematically where they can position a camera to just be peeking over a tree that they think is interesting in the foreground. And it gets so mechanical that you get drawn into it. And a lot of times, people look at photography like, okay, it's the end result that is going to be the best part of this, and it's the photo. And that's what everyone sees on social media. We're all social media driven. Everyone sees
Right.
that end result, and that's what people love. But for the photographer, and what I found as I've matured in this, because in the beginning it's all about, oh, I gotta get likes, and that's what kind of drives you. It's like, I want to get an awesome photo that gets recognized by people, and I want people to tell me how good it is. Well, as I've gotten older and needed less validation from other humans, I've kind of gravitated towards the process of taking photos, and that therapy value um, really
That's
does.
really cool.
It's immeasurable. It's immeasurable. I mean, it really, really is. It's a single thing I've done probably best for myself over the years that have gotten me through maybe tough times and honestly great times too. Like, and another thing too, this is kind of, I think, an artistic thing. It doesn't even matter if it's photography or painting or sculpting. It doesn't matter what it is, but your mood comes out in your work. So if you're having an off day and you're really frustrated, a lot of times you'll go out and you'll not find a single thing to shoot. You're just like, it just like everything sucks. You're not finding anything good to shoot, and you'll go home and you won't have taken a picture, and you're that much more frustrated. Other times when you're in a great mood, you'll go out and you'll be like, you'll get three of your best photos you've gotten in the last 6 months. And it's just like, how's that even
Yeah.
possible? Well, it's not supernatural. It's kind of comes from within. I mean, like any art does. It's just how you see it through your eyes that day with your mood.